Hey besties, welcome back. We're in season 2. Good to see you. We're really excited because I think we really want to focus more this season on building out our community. So we might be having some fun, like digital events for our listeners to join in on the conversation. So yeah, that'll be the focus, but we're kind of just going to have a little reunion call for this new season, check in on each other, and kind of, I guess, talk more about what our intentions are, what we're looking forward to this season. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
How are y'all feeling? We made it.
Yeah. 2024 was a doozy. That's for sure. We learned a lot.
We really needed those calls,
Yeah.
our therapy sessions.
Yeah. I actually, Leah.
No, you go.
No, you go.
Oh.
Remember, we're not supposed to be polite this season. We're supposed to.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ripping out the. Okay. So.
No deflection.
Yeah, no deflections. Yeah. So what I was gonna say was
And I also need to say penis a lot. Remember?
That's right. We're gonna count.
Yes.
Every episode needs one penis.
That sounds really bad. No, but we're all about Asian American women. Empowerment. Go back and listen to season 1. You'll get the inside joke.
Yeah.
The one on bodies, I think.
Yes, it was the one on.
Yeah, I think that's the one.
Yeah. What I was gonna say was, there was a lot of like therapy, a lot of deep reflection. And I'm looking forward to, I mean, at least I've been hearing from some folks that I know who listen about like starting their own like local community events, about wanting to get their tribe or, group of friends together. And, I think this direction makes a lot of sense of, like just building and having more conversations like this with more people.
Yeah, and I think like in one of our chats, our messaging chats, like I think last season maybe, or was it during our branding call, like we were talking about, well, what is the focus for this season, and is anything going to change? And one thing was, are we going to keep the, hi, this is Marin, this is Ray, and we were all like, wait, we never remember the order of who needs to go, so we're going to scrap that. And then I think something that I really liked is that we were talking about this idea of community being like the focus. And I think we ended last season talking about how connection was really important to us. And throughout our conversation, we're like, okay, well, it's connection, it's community, like to others maybe, or whatever it was. And then I think like several weeks later or several days later, Marin was like, maybe it's about the connection between ourselves and to others. And I was like, oh my gosh, I think that's like the perfect focus. Because I think like last year I realized how important social connection was. And actually through therapy, that's when we feel the most safe, right? In our bodies, when we feel open enough to connect with our loved ones and connect with our friends and to be in community with others. That's like the true sign of health. And I don't think it's a coincidence that, like the single most predictor of longevity and like wellness is the quality of your social connections. And so when you said that, like so many things clicked for me, and I was like, this is the same thing I'm like, realizing in my other podcast, and just everything kind of culminated and converged on this idea. And I just thought it was really perfect. So I'm really excited to explore that part of our theme for this coming season.
Yeah, I think we all deserve pats on the back because, we have busy lives. You're both moms, and we really did prioritize our commitment to each other, through this podcast and just making friendship a priority. I think that was one of my big aha moments, was realizing like how important female friendships are to me in my life, and that how, like I said, they sometimes can fall by the wayside, or, even back in the day when you get a boyfriend, you get all excited, and then you
Like,
push your
hi.
girlfriend take a backseat.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like, yeah, now in our 40s, I just feel like it's so essential. And then to what Ray was saying, you know, the beauty of our conversations is having them sort of unscripted, is that I feel like we do learn more about ourselves through our conversations and through hearing each other's experiences and what we resonate with. And so, yeah, they really do go hand in hand. And I kind of want to talk, maybe delve more on the friendship end of like, how has this podcast maybe like deepened or changed your understanding of friendship, or even like where it, falls on your own priority list?
Can I start?
Yes.
Yes, that's a good. That was the first time you've ever said
You
this in
didn't
season
deflect.
2. Ray is going to be like taking up more
New-
space.
Well, I was going to say, I think I mentioned this in our season finale, but I really mean this. And the idea is, I don't think I understood what a real friendship was until we started talking last season about friendship and practicing friendship and talking about all these topics and really like being there for each other. That I realized what friends actually do for each other. And I was like, oh my gosh, it is life giving. But it's also, I realized it can be a lot of mental and emotional work, which I think just goes to show how emotionally immature I was and still kind of am. But I think I've matured a lot emotionally throughout the first season. And I wanted to also say, like, I was listening to some of the conversations back, and I was thinking, like, Leah is really optimistic. And she always sees, like, the good. Like, she always sees the good in people. And she always tries to, like, say, like, find the thing that has the most positive spin or has, like, a positive spin in the way that she says it. And I think, like, before I was thinking, oh, positivity is great and like it's always a good thing to be positive. But then there was like this whole talk about toxic positivity, and so I was trying not to be as positive and trying not to be like so uppity. But I realized like Leah helped me bring back that part of myself that is kind of really important, I think, in a friendship, in a relationship, and also in connection to yourself. And I realized, like, because I was trying so hard to, like, get away from toxic positivity, that I, like, went way into toxic negativity.
Scorpio.
Oh, I know. I have that range. And so it kind of helped me come back to like, center, like homeostasis. So I think for me, like this friendship has helped me realize like there are so many parts of ourselves and that like, you know, you can lean into the positive, but the strength of a relationship is like also the range of that whole the whole range of emotions, right? That you can weather most of them together because of that strength that you have in the relationship. So that's kind of my reflection, but I'm curious what you guys think. Leah?
Yeah, as you're saying that, I was reflecting on a couple things. One, I never really thought you were like super toxically negative, so you always got that right balance. So I think it's a good. It's interesting to hear your perspective. But I remember, I think I texted this or yeah, in Messenger, I told you about this. I was in New York a few weeks ago for a work trip. And no offense to anyone who lives in New York, but I hate New York, um, especially at night, especially as a female of color walking in the dark, trying to just get back to like a hotel room. Like it's just all the things, right? It's very crowded. It's very scary. People will just come up to you and talk to you, and it's kind of like, is this like a regular conversation, or are you about to like mug me, and it's a lot of that fear. But my point is, I did some, and then I went into coaching training, and I kind of like, this was one of the things I brought to my coaching session. And what came out of that was I realized that fear was actually this anger about, why do I have to go through that? Like, it's so unfair to feel othered. Like not everyone feels the same way as me. If I was like a tall white male, like my husband, like I probably wouldn't be as scared or have all these anxious thoughts about all the potential ways I could not make it back home, from being in a city like that. And that anger just made me more appreciative in the end. I mean, for both of you, and just there is a strength in numbers of being able to not only share that experience with both of you and you get it, whereas not everyone does. I think that's one piece of it. And two, like, even if we're pretty distant, I think it's not just, New York, like that specific situation, but it is a lot of things that we go through in our lived experiences and that we're about to go through, right? With post-election stuff, like with everything that's happened and is going to be happening. It's a scary world, especially for, like people who look the way we do or people who have experienced life the way we do. And I think that's part of why I'm fired up about the community aspect, is that I want to channel that anger into something. And I used to not be an angry person, and hanging out with you two has really driven me to be
At least you're
a very passionately angry person. So in that same coaching session, I ended up having to like channel like a boxer. Cause like my coach was like, you're like wanting to release this energy. He's like, let it out. And I just like started like fake punching. And I was like, I'm channeling my inner Marin and Ray. So anyway.
I think that's so funny. I'm like
That's
talking
awesome.
about how she's like given me positivity, and she's like, oh, I got the anger from you.
I got angry, but good angry. It's good to be angry about things. And it's better than being scared, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, you kind of told the two sides because, I mean, it's the yin and the yang. And I think, we started off the podcast like talking as Asian women, how we were kind of in a little box. And I think now we just have more permission to feel all of our feelings and kind of accept the full range. And yeah, I feel the same way, definitely. Like, so I don't know where I fall on the spectrum.
I know.
Where do
more
I fit in?
more angry or more optimistic?
Well, I think there are so many other emotions. I think like, the joy and like the anger probably gets the most attention because they're probably the most like, I don't know, external facing emotions. I don't know. But I think there are so many more emotions. So yeah.
Have you all seen The Inside Out? The new
I
one?
was gonna say, yeah.
The anxiety.
Anxiety. Oh.
Yeah. I think it's just giving voice to those emotions that we kind of had to push down a lot, in the previous like chapters of our lives, like living with anxiety, living with the fear, living with the anger, but not having any outlet for it. So, I think that's what we love about our space is like we think of it as a safe space where we can get vulnerable and know we won't be judged, or have it used against us, whether it's because we're Asian or because we're women, I think I always lived in fear of like fully expressing my opinions because I thought like someone would retaliate against me, that used to be my biggest fear in life, which is pretty funny now at my age, but like to be disliked. Like I was
Mm.
so afraid of that. It almost felt like it would be like a death to me. But now I like really don't care that much at all.
Yeah. I think I like, yeah, being able to feel the full spectrum of emotion. I think that's a really great and colorful way of putting like what we've built here and what we're able to share with, you all. So, and I think it's that. I think like before this, right? It was a very, well, at least for me, it was like a very lonely, a very safe world where it was a lot of like, I can only express so much anger before, I start to feel unsafe or start to
Mm.
feel like someone would not like me anymore. It could cost me, like whatever that is. And these are very real things that we have had to deal with. I don't think these are just illusions growing up, but there was that risk of being othered or being. I mean, Ray, you shared your story about bullying. Like, there is a very big social risk to all the things, right? That, we're finally getting to be our full selves and be okay with that, right? And you imagine, like, we turned 40, 41. So we still have many, many years ahead of us. So I think that's the other fun part of the journey is like we're getting here now and we have a lot of years to express our full selves. So
Yeah, the
yeah.
world better watch out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
But you make a
true.
good point because there are real consequences to it. Like, I still feel that the world obviously is really not safe for women. Like, apparently, our world, we don't care about women's rights or anything in this country. But yeah, there's the threat of violence, even beyond like the social, repercussions. Like, I think, like, I learned that at a young age where if you reject a man, they can get really violent towards you. So you just learn to ignore and, kind of deflect and not pay attention. But yeah, it's not really safe for us as women to express our anger fully, in the world. So it's nice that we can do it privately on this podcast, private slash publicly. But yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, it is true that, like, to feel that safety is really hard. And I think that's another reason why I don't leave my house. Anytime I leave my house, like, I like start sweating. I am really scared. I am very hyper vigilant so that like by the time I'm home, like I'm completely depleted of energy because I spent so much time like monitoring for my safety. And I do this less in Korea because, well, first we have gun laws, like there are no guns. And yes, there are some crazy people with knives, but I think in general, this country feels safe. I say this after, several days after martial law was in effect for 6 hours. But, I think in general, I feel safer here. But when I'm back in the States, like Leo was saying, this idea of being other, right? And like what you're saying, Marin, of like being women, and like being a person of color. And like I'm a very short, like woman. And I do know martial arts, but not enough, I think, to like truly protect myself against somebody who wants me hurt or injured or killed. And so I think about safety a lot. And I think about like how that really stifles our ability to feel all of our feelings if the primary feeling that takes up the most space is fear, right? And this idea of not being safe. And so I do wish, like in the second season, that we are able to kind of like if we're a flower, right, to sort of petal outward and open up, and see our range of emotions and see that it's that we are safe. But I think part of it is that I have to not fake it, but I have to create for myself a space where I feel safe. And so, yeah, like you said, this is kind of that space and community for me to practice that safety.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, I'd love to hash out some of our like fears of what we're feeling like, coming into this new year where I feel like there's so many reasons to feel increasingly unsafe in the world. But I feel like while that's happening, it can feel so disempowering, and to think like I voted, but I did what I could, but it can't like change the world. But I do believe that we can like create these community spaces of safety among each other. And that's kind of what will get us through, you know? And so I think, yeah, it's kind of added, I think, more importance and purpose for me in doing this podcast because I think we all need it, to whether it's just venting our anxieties about the future and our lives. So I think for me, that's like a huge intention is to create a safe space for us to talk with each other and also, welcome in our listeners too.
Yeah, I feel like it's brought a sense of urgency because I guess, had the election, like swung the other way, I think it would have felt more like relief. Like, okay, finally, like this is what we were looking forward to and it's finally realized in the world. But I think now that the opposite has happened, it feels very much like I guess we aren't as far along as we thought. And it's very frustrating. And it is kind of like, what can we do, together to get all of us through that, and hopefully relatively unscathed or being able to express ourselves along the way, right? Like, I'm hoping, this year, the next 4 years is, continues to be ones where, yeah, we continue to keep taking our space and be more vocal and feel the freedom to continue expressing ourselves, right, in that full range of emotions. And my biggest fear is the opposite, right? Like, I mean, here's a practical example is I don't jog at night. I don't know if you all do. I would not feel safe doing it alone, right? Like, and it's those things, like, but it becomes more of a mental thing too. Like, it's so scary to feel like your rights are limited, like that you are less than other people in this world, right? And like I said, I've been very angry about this for a few weeks now. And I feel very helpless at times about like, what can I do? And that's why, once again, right, I think, being able to talk to you both about this is healing and helpful and makes me feel less alone. And then I feel the more that we can build our community around this, and that open space, right? It's just, it's kind of like a wave, right? Like it amplifies or magnifies kind of the power that we do have that sometimes we forget or it gets easier to repress when, yeah, it feels like it's just me as an individual. So, yeah.
That I visualize something. So, okay, this is going to sound so weird.
Bring it.
So, my husband, he makes these really wonderful, like, one pot rice dishes where he puts a lot of vegetables and proteins and rice in it. And what happens is usually we have quite a bit of leftovers so that we freeze them for when we don't have time to make dinner. So we just pop those in the microwave. But sometimes I pack them in like a bigger container, and sometimes I pack them into smaller containers. And I realized like the bigger container takes a lot longer in the microwave to melt because it's so cold in the center. Whereas if I microwave two smaller dishes, like the glass, whatever they are, containers, they take a lot less time to microwave because there's less of a cold center. And so I feel like the big, and so I think the inverse or the converse is true. Like, if my mug, right, is full of hot water or soup, like it retains so much more heat. Whereas if I have like a smaller amount in a smaller cup, like the heat goes away sooner. And so I kind of feel like that's kind of the strength in majority. Like the more there is, and the more that we talk about what's important to us, and the longer we stay connected, the more strength that we have. And so, like, I think it's good that when we have frustrations, that we don't just keep it in within ourselves, but that we share it with other people, because not only are they probably feeling the same fears or the frustrations, but being able to talk about it with each other, like, increases either the cold or increases the warmth or retains the warmth for longer. So I know that was like a really long visual thing.
I
But
like that visual. I'm hungry
It
now,
makes
but
sense. I know. I'm cold, so I want some soup or something. But no, that totally makes sense because I feel like I don't know if it's a trauma response, but
yeah.
when we have that feeling of unsafety, and I think a lot of people have that feeling of disillusionment too. Like, I
yeah.
can't believe we're back in this position again,
Mm-hmm.
after everything. And you start to feel like your voice doesn't matter, and then you start to feel like you want to make yourself smaller, and it's not safe to express yourself. It's not safe to draw attention to yourself. All the concerns with technology, like listening to our every
My
thought.
God. Yes. Ugh.
But yeah, I mean, I think it ultimately is like you can live your life out of a place of love, or you can live your life out of a place of fear. And fear is more dominant sometimes in our mind, like when we're speaking of just survival, and our basic safety. And so, like, for me, it's almost like pushing against that instinct to
Mm-hmm.
stay small, you know, or to feel shame, or to feel like what I do makes no difference. Um, to, in these small ways, like, that show up and that are life giving to me. And I think that's what we were kind of talking about in the beginning of the episode, is that what's life giving to us is also life giving to others. And I feel like so much of kind of what we've experienced on the podcast is we're kind of holding mirrors up to each other
Yeah.
and being like, challenging each other on certain things. And that's how we learn most, and our country is so divided. And I think that's kind of what the powers that be want, is for us to all be divided into smaller and smaller portion sizes, where we have no connection to each other, and we forget, how much similarities and how many, like, common interests and causes that we have, right?
Yeah.
It's the divide and conquer that we've seen over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
So community building is like a rebellion, to that, I think. And even in small
100%.
ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. How have you
1000%.
guys all been feeling? Like, if we just dive into it, now that we've given our speeches, the unscripted part of, like, how have we really been feeling?
Leah.
I think I'm just trying to pretend like January 6th isn't gonna happen. Okay, so we're recording this. Yeah, I should be clear. December 6th right now. So I don't know if our listeners will hear this until after, but that's, yeah. So
Even
it's
that date has such a negative.
I know.
Just hearing it is like,
And it's hard to focus on Christmas this year. Like, I like bypass Thanksgiving. I don't even decorate. And Christmas, like, I'm trying to be excited about all the lights, and, like, partly for my kids too, right? Getting them like hyped up about celebrating, but I don't feel like celebrating, I'll be honest. Like, yeah, I'm just like, how do I maintain and preserve like my sense of self without falling into that trap of fear and just trying to survive, you know? Like that's no way to live. Yet clearly half of America thinks it's okay. So I think it makes me scared of like meeting new people and being like, I wonder which side you're on. I wonder how you actually think about me and how much of that will actually be realized, or will people feel brave enough to act on it, you know, come next year. So I think it's that. Once again, it triggers a lot of like, how authentic can I actually be with people I barely know? Yeah. How about you all?
Marin, what do you think?
That sounded like a deflection,
Ray's
right?
gonna mic drop at the end. I can
Yeah.
tell.
Okay. Yes. All right.
Yeah, I've been feeling like, unfortunately, I wasn't shocked. You know, obviously I was
Oh. Yeah.
disappointed, but I think we've seen the true colors of our country, and I have been feeling like it's like all the dark stuff has to come out into the light in order for it to be overturned. And I like to listen to like astrology podcasts. I listen to Trevor Noah's podcast. You know, I listen to people that kind of see things from different perspectives, like that kind of gives me a sense of, okay, maybe this is all happening for a reason, you know, because astrologically, I guess it's like don't quote me, but it's like the Jupiter returns or something of the United States, of actually like the inception of the United States. And I think we're in a time that's like very similar to when the Civil War happened. So it's almost like I feel that the United States is reckoning with itself. It's like all of the oppression and violence that this country was actually built on is coming out now, you know? And it's kind of like a house of cards in terms of all the propaganda that we've heard of like, oh, this is a place of dreams and freedom. And clearly we're seeing that's not the case. So I think if I try to take it from that lens of like, you're looking out into the Grand Canyon, you know, and you start to see, oh, this is an evolution that's built over hundreds, you know, centuries long. And we're in this moment of time when maybe like all the evil is being revealed so that it can be eradicated, or maybe some, you know, much more progressive change can happen than just the status quo. Because clearly like the status quo is not working. So I think that helps me and gives me a sense of comfort in a way, and just like focusing on what I can control and protecting my space. Like Leah, I think that's a really smart way to be. Like, I don't think that we should just be la-di-da, like open to everyone when we know we can't trust other people,
Yeah.
you know, like with COVID, I think that even made it more so, where we kind of have lost this sense of trust among others in our
it's sad,
community.
though,
You know, anytime
but
someone
yeah.
coughs near you, you're like,
Yeah,
get away from
ew.
me.
Where's their mask? Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think we should kind of vet people and see who's safe. And luckily, I did a huge filtering
Purging.
of people. Yeah, the purging like during 2020 and
Great purge.
even 2016. So like, I'm proud that I didn't really have to have any.
You're
You know?
good.
Yeah, exactly. Any enemies in my circles. But yeah, what about
I
you,
remember
Ray?
that was really painful for you,
I know,
especially because there were a lot of family members involved too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that I remember that purge for you, and that was really sad.
I think for me, like before, especially during the pandemic, it was so traumatic. I feel like we were seeing so many injustices happening. We all felt triggered. People were dying from COVID. Like there was just so much trauma happening that it brought up this sense of anger, like the fight or flight type thing within me. And I think now I'm less triggered in that way. I'm more just like kind of depressed about the state of the world. But I'm also thinking that my energy is better spent by investing in communities and like relationships that are life giving to me and that do align with my values, versus trying to like argue with someone who's like totally on the other side. I kind of let go of that idea that it's my responsibility to try to convert people, because everyone is choosing, you know, who they want to be and what their values are and which, you know, stories that they want to believe in. So that's been a shift for me because I think before I was very angry, and as I was like unlearning myself and becoming conscious of more things, that I did have all this anger. But now I feel like I just want to protect my own peace and invest my energy where it actually will make a difference.
Yeah.
Love that.
I totally hear both of you. And I think when the election came and went, and I just remember feeling really dejected, um, and embarrassed, because I'm currently based in South Korea, and I remember like a lot of people coming up to me and being like, "Oh, I'm so sorry for your country," um, and
We are too. I mean,
and I was like, "Yeah, thank you. I appreciate this support," but I felt very embarrassed, and like. I mean, I was also sympathizing because there are a lot of world leaders out there right now that, you know, their citizens are embarrassed about. And in South Korea, it's no exception here. I think his impeachment hearing is at 7 p.m. today. So, and I think even members of his own party are like planning to vote in favor of impeachment because there's proof that he has like a second martial law attempt coming soon. So anyway, I think it's really sad when you see people in power or people vote for people to come into power who use a lot of control and fear tactics to bring about division. And I just kind of think like, the idea of centering this idea of community, right? And what can we do to create community to combat their efforts to divide? And I have a good friend who is now Republican. She wasn't when we first met. And I was really, really surprised to hear how all of the right wing rhetoric got to her. And rather than coming from a place of like shock and judgment, which is very tempting to do, I was like, okay, I I need to wait and figure out how this could have happened. And so I tried to like nestle into my curiosity. And so I asked her questions and asked her about like all these policies and what she thinks about them and like all this stuff. And I just remember being like, okay, listening to you talk about your reasoning behind why you are now a convert, it doesn't make complete. I mean, it makes sense. And I wouldn't have made the decisions or converted based on her logic myself, but I was able to like separate my political values and beliefs from her because I was focusing on the connection and the relationship that we do have. And it's really hard because when you care about somebody who has different political values than you, and who sees the systems and like social order differently than you, it feels incredibly threatening. And that's why when I was talking to her, I was thinking of Marin when you were dealing with that great purge with like your family members. I was like, how did you go through this? Because it's like, it's incredibly, it's, I don't even know how to explain that feeling because like you care about this person, like you have a strong relationship, you guys even share blood, right? And here they are like voting for policies that essentially keep you where you are and keep you feeling unsafe and keep you feeling smaller and not being able to take up space. So, I'm like battling this. And so when you guys are saying like be, like allowing people to be in that safe space with you, and I'm just kind of like, how do we practice community making while at the same time protecting and preserving our survival? And it just feels so polarizing, even within myself, which is like really antithetical to like our idea of like our connection to ourself and connection to others. And so, yeah, I am very confused, is what I am. Like, before I was feeling dejected and like, woe is me. But now I'm just like really confused, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the intention. We have to acknowledge the misinformation that's out there, and that so some of Trump's supporters like really believe whatever lies he's spewing, And so it's very hard to like combat that or have an honest conversation because I've had friends who have had conversations with, Trump supporters and they believe that the Democrats are all pedophiles and they're doing
Oh,
all
I
this evil
know.
stuff. So if you actually believe those stories, which some of his supporters really do, you
Hmm.
know, then it's like, okay, like you can somewhat, it's like, okay, if you're really buying into all the misinformation, then you could see why they might, support him. So that's the hard thing is you can't really combat misinformation because you can say, hey, he's a rapist. Hey, he's this. And they're like, no, that's all lies. Right.
Right.
And so that's where, how can you really have a conversation when you're talking about two different sets of
Always.
information?
Hmm.
So that's where I think like the tech companies are so they should be more accountable, or our media outlets. And it's just, yeah, the spreading of
Yeah.
misinformation has been to the point where it's like people are just seeing the world completely differently,
Yeah.
and they may think that they have similar values, but
Hmm.
it's so I think it's meant to be confusing. That's about.
Well, what I was thinking is, so like this, my whole platform is about education, right? And I think I've been reading a lot of articles about how the reason Trump won is because he we're talking about like Kamala Harris and like the Democrats, they're like really educated, right? And they have all these like high degrees and have like these, they come from what has traditionally been tied to like the elite, right? And like so much of America is kind of like uneducated and don't have access to like money to have that education and so on. And so a lot of these people are saying the reason he won is because he knew where most of America was, and they're like poor working class and blah 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 blah. And then I was like, there is so much like irony here because like he is this multi-millionaire, billionaire, whatever, and like I don't know, there's like a lot of confusion there because it's like there's this talk of privilege and education and money and power. And I just feel like, you know, access to education is really what like allows you to mobilize. But then, I'm having like on my podcast, Homeroom, I'm just thinking about education and how like there, there is it's like so top down and it's like we're taking away authority and agency. And I just think about like this idea of education being important I can't believe that that's kind of one of the main threads of like this whole confusing why he won kind of conversation and discourse, because his idea of like dismantling the like Department of Education, for a very like short period of time, I was like really surprised because I actually kind of agreed with that because I was like, but that was because I was under the mistaken assumption that the education department was really what set like all the curriculum across the states, but actually that's state determined, and the Department of Education is more about like dispersing funds, and well, anyway, there's a lot of complicated nuance there, but yeah, one of the things was, now I'm like confusing it all, but essentially I feel like in addition to all of the misinformation and the spreading of lies, it's also these really big clashes on how they're seeing really big policies and systems in place, like education. I know that that's a really big topic, and that too is also confusing because like the power dynamics is really hard to navigate. So anyway, that was like a really long psychobabble about I don't even know what, but that's kind of how I'm feeling. I'm just really confused and just, yeah, trying to figure out where all the threads are.
The two things that come to mind for me are, I mean, I think just going back to education, at least maybe this isn't whole true. I don't know. I didn't do research on it. But my observation is that the more education you get, right, the more open-minded you are because you are more exposed to diversity of thought, diversity of people, right? A lot of colleges, your college towns, right, are very diverse. You meet more people you normally wouldn't have otherwise, right? And I think there's a lot of fear in folks who are uneducated because they feel threatened. But you go back to the story of Thanksgiving and how America became what it is. And I had to try and explain this to my kids in a kind way of how Thanksgiving wasn't just a feast where the Native Americans just invited these foreigners, to share a meal with them, right? But kind of like, no, these Europeans brought diseases and anyway. So there's that, right? So I think there is this piece, right? It is fear on the other side too, right? We sense this fear. The other side also senses fear of change, of things they don't understand, right? Of things like, how could you be open-minded to da-da-da-da-da, right? Like, it's unnatural. It's this, it's that. So like, from my perspective, like, yes. And, but I happen to be like one of those open-minded people who's like, no, like it is of none of your concern, right, to step on other people's freedoms and rights and so on. And then I want to ask you both, like, have you seen Wicked yet? Or have you
Yes, I saw it on opening day.
Yes. Have you, Ray?
Not
I don't
yet.
want to like spoil. Okay.
But I know the
The
song
story?
by heart.
Okay,
yeah, I know the
good.
whole story. I watched the musical multiple times.
Okay.
Is
I
it
mean,
the same?
it's the same, but actually the movie that came out is Act 1. So there's going to be another part next year. So this is literally a more drawn out version, and they go into a lot more detail about maybe some things that kind of they skim through in the play. I didn't read the book, which is apparently completely different and even like gets into really like interestingly weird, dirty details. Anyway, I digress. Yeah, so don't have your kids read a book. Read the book is what I've heard. Anyway, the point I'm bringing up Wicked is it's very much that story, right? Where they present, the good side and the magical side as like, everyone, is like all for the wizard and the wizard makes things better. And, lo and behold, right? It's like the witch is actually like the good one and all these things, right, that they make her out to be is because, right, the masses are able to tell that story of this person, right? They had an agenda against her, the Wicked Witch, and made her wicked in the eyes of the people, right? And it really is kind of like that. It's like, well, whose truth do you believe? And, like, how do you get to the bottom of that, right? And not everyone's willing to do the work. Right. There is a lot of misinformation. Like, I've heard that social media has way taken over the place where people reference things instead of traditional media. And it's just, yeah, like, I mean, like, is the internet a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know anymore, but it's connected us and brought us closer together. And at the same time, yeah, like, it's hard to cull through, like, what is actually the right side of history, what is actually going to make good, right? But I'm a firm believer, right? Like, I'm like, well, of course, the more open you are to things and the more freedoms people can express, surely, like, I'm like, I will like, die on a hill for that. That is the right side of history. But it's kind of like, I guess not everyone sees it that way, and there is that tension and that confusion is, yeah, very real. So
Yeah, Wicked is definitely a metaphor for our times.
we could go really into detail of how it's
I mean, they were vilifying a woman of color, and the person in charge was all smoke and mirrors. Yeah.
An old white man, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. It does feel like, even what Ray was saying about, like, what's happening in Korea, it does feel like it's all about power,
Yeah.
and basically, like, the patriarchy, white supremacy. It's like, it's not working anymore, and more people are being educated to see how evil it is and how it's worked against themselves and their loved ones. And so we were seeing, like, this like, kind of doubling down, in terms of, like, white patriarchy in the United States and then even around the world, just like male leaders, trying to be dictators. And so I hope that, I don't know, we can see the other side of it. We can see, like, the crumbling of that empire.
I mean,
and
yes, I
rebuilding.
want it to crumble because, yeah, they're not going to give up that power easily. And
I mean, that's what we're hearing so much about, right? We're hearing, like, world wars thrown out there. We're hearing, like, the end of democracy thrown out there. We're hearing so many things, and, like, maybe that, I don't know. It's just, it's confusing times for sure. But we can't give up. We have to just keep being able to, find hope within our families, and, like, the way that you're raising your children, and, the fact that we won't be made to feel like our voice doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And to stop having these conversations,
I wanted to say I recently heard something. I don't know if I shared it with you guys. Maybe I did. But there's this woman, and she's talking about how the opposite of patriarchy, right, is matriarchy. And so the patriarchy centers men at the center. And so you think, oh, the matriarchy centers women. But that's not the case. The matriarchy centers our children at the center and builds the world around the child. Whereas the patriarchy puts the father or the man at the center of the world and has everybody, revolve around them. And so I just love this idea of, like, going towards this new place of centering our children, not taking away their power, giving them an education that allows them to see that their connection to themselves are equally as important to the connection that they have with others. And children who grow up to not only be empathetic to themselves, but to be empathetic to diverse perspectives. And, always centers community over division, whatever that is. So that's the vision that I would love to work towards, is building a matriarchy that centers our children rather than the men who just want to, you know, wage wars and take power away from everybody.
I feel like we were so close and we didn't get it. So,
Yeah. Did you hear that the reason Trump won is because he will win, he will lose to a man, but he will never lose to a woman or something along those lines. And so, yeah, like his base is misogynistic.
gross.
Yeah, this is just a little taste of what you're going to see in season 2. But we're not going to shy away from the hard topics. We're going to give you all of our hot takes.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I love what you said, Ray. I think that's something that a lot of activists speak about is like the success of a society can be seen of like how they treat the most vulnerable among the population. So that's the children and the elderly. And we can see what the United States, you know, with gun laws and healthcare, like what the United, you know, and so yeah, I really love that definition. And anything, I guess we can maybe end on what we are, you know, like we're saying, connection to ourselves and others is like, what are we hoping now in the midst of all this, all these different feelings we're having?
I
Yeah.
want to activate others who are listening to this. And yeah, that was the first word that comes to mind is just like, I want to light a fire. Like, you know, it's, yeah, no one should have to go through this alone. And you don't have to. So,
I just watched the first season of Ted Lasso.
yay.
And this is saying
Great
a
show.
lot because I have not watched a show since, I don't know, like forever ago. And something he says in one of his monologues, not really a monologue, but one of his, a scene, he talks about the importance of curiosity and how, you know, being curious trumps everything, and how that actually will bring people closer together. And so I'm trying to, my word is lead with curiosity. That's kind of my thing right now. What about you, Maren?
I think the word is community. I just hope that, you know, people don't feel isolated and alone and that there is no hope, and that, you know, I feel so blessed to have you two where we can feel free to talk about whatever we need to talk about. And even if you don't have that, I hope that you can listen to us and you can connect with us and feel that, you know, you're not alone, because we have to stick together. I mean, you know,
Yeah, scary times out there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Awesome.
well, I think that's the end of this first episode of season 2. And yeah, look forward to more topics like these. Definitely follow us on social media at Your Asian Besties. And we'll see you in the next one. Bye.